Hey guys, Rafi here from the Endgame Investor, and a subscriber of mine suggested that before the endgame I do a top 10 video. So I'm going to do the top 10 myths that people believe about gold and silver, or the top 10 mistakes people make about gold and silver. Some of these are going to be related to others. I picked 10 as an arbitrary number because humans happen to have 10 fingers and we count in base 10. If you only have 9 fingers and you count in base 9, well then
Fingers numbering 9.
you can skip one or pretend that the two most related are really one, or whatever it is that you want to do. And with gold and especially silver going parabolic, the gold to silver ratio descending towards 15 to 1, I don't think it's going to get there immediately, but we're on the way there. And the end game appearing to be imminent and going to happen in 2026 at some point, I figure now is as good a time as any to get this video out. So let's do it. The top 10 mistakes or myths people believe or make about gold and silver. These include both credit enthusiasts and gold and silver stackers. Both make the same mistakes. And this top 10 list is brought to you by my Substack, endgameinvestor.substack.com, where you can find articles related to this top 10 list. All the links to those articles that relate to what I'm talking about now are in the description below. You can also get a Dirty Man safe. Use the code ENDGAME10 at checkout. You take it, you bury it in your backyard, you put your gold and silver in it. Obviously, you put your gold and silver in it before you bury it, because then you won't be able to put your gold and silver in it if you already bury it. Because safes are dangerous, because they're obviously storing valuable products, whereas they can't find or would even think that you have a Dirty Man safe. Check the link in the description below and use code ENDGAME10 at checkout for 10% off. And finally, get your gold and silver while you still can at Miles Franklin. Link in the description below, and mention the Endgame Investor. I heard from Andy Shechtman that these silver inventories are starting to sell out. Anyway, here we go. Myth number one.
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 Gold or silver represent or store value or wealth or energy or anything other than themselves. Gold and silver are metals. They don't store or represent anything. Money doesn't represent anything. It doesn't store anything. It doesn't store value, and it doesn't store wealth. It is a liquid commodity, which means its price relative to other commodities fluctuates the least of any material in the world. Money doesn't store value, it just fluctuates very slowly relative to all other things that a human being may need. And there are obviously reasons for that because of its physical properties, but those don't really matter. They are what they are, and because of those physical properties, the value of these things fluctuate the least. That is what we call a store of value, but gold and silver don't store anything, nor do they represent anything. What represents something is credit. Credit is an invention that represents money. If I give you a note saying that I owe you money, which is gold and silver, then that note represents my debt to you. And it could represent it honestly, it could represent it dishonestly. Either way, I have to give you what I owe you in money, and the money itself represents nothing. It just itself, just as oil doesn't represent anything, or wheat doesn't represent anything, or lumber doesn't represent anything. It's just used for things because we need it as human beings. A bottle, like the bottle behind me, stores wine or liquid. Gold doesn't store anything. It's just a metal. It's just atoms, and the value of those atoms fluctuate the least relative to all other things that human beings want or need. That's what makes it a money. Myth number two.
Two.
We went off the gold standard in 1971. No, we did not. The dollar is still a note for gold. The technical reason is that gold still exists on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, and the dollar is still a liability unit of the Federal Reserve. By definition, that's what it is. Underneath all of the debt that exists on the Fed's balance sheet, which issues the dollar, there still is a pile of gold there, or gold certificates. The gold certificates, yes, they represent gold, but the gold itself, assuming that it's there, is still backing the dollar. The debt is on top of that. The reason that you can't go off the gold standard, that it is impossible, is because of the monetary regression principle, or Mises's monetary regression theorem, as the Austrian school economists call it. That means that prices have a certain meaning. They convey information. With that information, we engage in a division of labor. The division of labor makes everyone know what they're supposed to be doing that day so that we don't end up in a zombie apocalypse. The only way for prices to maintain any semblance of reality is for them to be linked to the past. The only reason that you know what you need to do today is because you know what you needed to do yesterday, and so on and so forth into the past. At some point in the past, a dollar was issued in representation of gold, representation of or storage of gold, which was the original money. The dollar continued from that chain, and that chain continues today. Every time there's a big bump in the chain, there's a big economic hyperinflation or depression, something like that. But at the end of a hyperinflation, you always go back to gold or silver. And at the end of a deflation, gold to dollars, or gold to whatever currency it is, gets revalued. For example, in 1933, it was from 21 to 35, and that was a huge bump in the road. But you can't go off the gold standard. It is impossible. What the dollar can do, if the dollar goes off the gold standard, you stop using dollars. Fiat enthusiasts, they like to tell me, well, gold isn't money because you can't use it in exchange for things directly. Well, I say, yes, that's true. Dollars are the required derivative of gold that you use in a store in exchange for things. But if you go to a store and you try to acquire things with dollars, if those dollars have no gold value, meaning there is no exchange rate between those dollars or that currency, whatever it is, and gold, then nobody will accept the dollars. When you trade dollars for something, you are trading the gold value of those dollars for that thing. If those dollars or that currency has no gold value, it is valueless and it cannot be used for anything. The gold window is still open. We have not gone off the gold standard. When we do, meaning there is no longer an exchange rate between any amount of gold and any amount of dollars, the dollar will cease to be a credit derivative, and it will die and nobody will use it anymore. The goal of all stackers should be to end the gold standard once and for all, so that nobody is able to use dollars anymore, so that everyone returns to money, so that the government can no longer inflate the dollar supply and thereby suck gold value from us, the citizenry, and make itself richer by the process of thieving from us. The gold standard has not ended. The goal is to end it and start over. Myth number three.
Three.
Neither gets up. It's a draw, and Freak will win the title automatically. The count is...
Money is an invention. No, it's not. Gold is simply the most liquid commodity that exists. It is a natural substance. It happens to have liquidity because its value changes very slowly relative to everything else in the world. That's why it's money. Money is not an invention, just like diamonds are not an invention, or the blackest thing in the universe is not an invention. It's just a black thing. Diamonds are not an invention. They are just the hardest thing. Money is not an invention. It's just the most liquid thing. What is an invention? Credit. Credit represents a debt of money. Money is a natural thing. It's the most liquid commodity in an economy, and that's what makes it money. We can use a religious analogy here. There is one God. Now, you could build a statue to represent God, and then put in your head all of the features that this God would have for you in your mind, it could be all powerful, it could be all forgiving, it could have big biceps, or whatever you want to think that it has. But that's all in your mind. It's not real. The statue that you built represents something that's in your mind. So too, if you try to invent a money, which is impossible, you can create credit, you can invent credit on top of money. You cannot invent a money out of nothing. That is like idolatry and imagining that a statue has certain traits that you want to put on it that it doesn't actually have. Am I calling money God? Certainly not. But I am saying that money is a real thing, whereas credit is a representation in our minds. As long as it represents not as money, it's a good thing. When you're lying about it and it represents nothing, it either doesn't work or it inflates and it steals from people. If we were to take Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin pretends to have all of the characteristics that a good money has: divisibility, fungibility, whatever ability. It's even better than gold in all of its imagined characteristics. The thing is, it doesn't actually exist. There's nothing there. It has no traits at all except for what people imagine, because once you get to the actual Bitcoin, there's nothing there. It's all in people's minds. It is not a money. It is a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of money. Money is gold and silver, which represent nothing but themselves. Myth number 4.
Four. Get out from left. Get on your feet!
Money and barter are fundamentally different from each other. No, they are on a continuum. Barter is simply the trade of one thing for another thing. Money is also barter. It's just barter of one less liquid thing for one ultimately liquid thing, or the most liquid thing. That's what makes it money. So barter is on the same continuum, the same spectrum as all barter transactions. It's just easier to do because the gold is more liquid. So you can divide it and you can funge it, or what's the word for fungibility? And you can store it and it doesn't go bad, and all these physical characteristics that make it more liquid. That's why people use it. Nobody invented using gold. People just started doing it and realized that it works better than trading other things directly for other things directly, especially if those things are consumable and the thing that you want goes bad, or the other guy doesn't want the other thing that you're trading. Nobody invented this. It just happened because it works. Just like nobody invented diamonds, people just started wearing them because they were hard and shiny and nice. Myth number 5.
Five.
Silver was demonetized in 1873. No, you cannot make a money a non-money. Silver's nature as a metal was not changed in 1873. It's the same metal it was back then. It will be the same metal long after we're gone. It will not change. So what happened in 1873? A law was passed that the government would no longer be exchanging its credit, or the banks would no longer be exchanging their credit notes for silver, only for gold. So that cut off a lot of the demand for silver, the monetary demand for silver, in favor of gold. And truth be told, gold money is more stable than silver money because gold is more liquid than silver, at least gold derivatives, honest gold derivatives. If they represent honestly gold, then they are more liquid than silver itself. But that doesn't mean silver is demonetized. It just means that its monetary demand is now masked by gold derivatives. But when those gold derivatives no longer work because they've been so inflated above the gold supply that nobody trusts that they represent any amount of gold at all, the monetary demand for silver will reassert itself suddenly, because if no gold derivative works, there is nothing else you can use to divide goods and services on a retail level but silver itself. And that appears to be what is happening now, and why silver goes parabolic every now and then as gold derivatives tend to die out. It almost died in 1979, 1980, but Volcker was able to jack interest rates up to keep the gold derivative alive. But this time, They won't be able to, and silver will keep going up and up until its dollar equivalent is undefined and we go back to silver coins out of necessity to maintain whatever remains of the division of labor before a zombie apocalypse ensues. Myth number 6.
Six.
Six. Now Heck trying to get up. Eighth fighter trying to beat the count. Now the champ is trying to get up.
CBDCs will enslave us all. That is impossible. CBDCs are not any different from the current digital dollar. Most of the dollars we use are digital. CBDCs are just another form of digital dollarness. As we talked about the monetary regression principle, all prices have to be indexed to the past or they make no sense at all. And if they make no sense at all, there are no prices and therefore there is no division of labor. So any CBDC that has to be instituted or that will be instituted, and I'm not doubting that they will try, they will be based on the current price structure, which is based on the current digital dollar, which economically is the same thing as the CBDC. The CBDC is just much less privacy because they can track every single transaction. They can track most transactions today, which is why they're trying to outlaw cash, which is the only thing they can't track. But anyway, if the dollar collapses and the pretext to building up a CBDC network or activating a CBDC network is because the dollar lost all value and now we have to go to CBDCs, that is impossible because you're talking about building another floor on a collapsed pile of rubble. The pile of rubble will be the dollar, this digital dollar that we're currently using, and the CBDC would have to be built on top of that because of the regression principle that states that all prices must be indexed to the past. But if prices make no sense in dollars because of hyperinflation, they will make no sense in CBDCs either. The CBDCs will be worthless, and the people will go to gold and silver out of necessity because they don't want to starve. Governments do not have any control over societies that are hyperinflating because governments depend on the division of labor. They feed off of it. That's where they get all their resources. If the division of labor breaks down, the government breaks down, and CBDCs cannot save them. It will not work at all. Myth number 7.
What happened to 7?
Just kidding.
7! Screaming for all his work. The champ can't make it. He swung for the canvas.
Money used to be gold, but now it's debt. No, money is still gold. It's still on the balance sheet. The debt did not replace the gold dollar. It's just built on top of it. You have a huge mountain of debt. The mountain of debt does not float in the air. It rests on some foundation. That foundation is gold. The gold is still on the Fed's balance sheet. The dollar is still gold at 42.22 an ounce. Money is not debt. Credit is debt. Literally, credit is debt because if I credit you $1, you are in debt to me $1 by definition. Credit and debt are the same thing from other sides, from other perspectives, from different perspectives. Same, different side of the same coin, as literal as you can make that. Money is not debt. Credit is debt. Credit did not replace money. It's built on top of it. We are not in a debt-based money system. We are in a debt-based credit system. And gold is still money. When credit no longer represents money, the credit will be worthless, the money will remain, and everyone will have to use whatever money they can find or whatever money they have, or be ejected from the division of labor until they can figure out how to earn it. Myth number 8.
8.
The dollar in the endgame will be replaced by some other currency. Maybe the euro, maybe a BRICS currency, maybe the ruble, maybe the shekel, maybe the Iranian, whatever it is. No, none of those will replace the dollar because all of them are derivatives of the dollar. We are in a dollar-based credit system, which is on a gold-based money system. The dollar backs every other currency on the planet because in the central banks of other currencies is a reserve of dollars. It's as literal as you can make it. If the dollar collapses, all other currencies collapse with it because every other currency is based on the dollar. The only thing that remains is gold and silver. Once the dollar collapses, there will be no currencies in the immediate aftermath. You will build them up later based on a new credit system, which will again be based on gold and silver, hopefully this time more honestly, but that's going to take time. In the immediate aftermath, there will be no currency replacing the dollar. It will simply be gold and silver. That's it. Myth number 9.
9.
never use gold and silver coins in trade ever again. False. When the credit system collapses, because credit, unlike money, is an invention, there will be no choice but to use gold and silver directly in trade. No credit will be trusted. All you will be able to do is use gold and silver coins in trade, mostly silver because gold will be way too valuable. But yes, there will be a point in the immediate aftermath of the endgame, perhaps for a few months, perhaps for a year, I don't know exactly how long, where the only thing you will be able to trade for goods and services are gold and silver coins. Otherwise, you can barter and you might be able to sell your house for a week's worth of food or trade your house for a week's worth of food. But since houses are not very liquid and gold and silver are, you'd much rather trade a few dimes for a week's worth of food than an entire house because then you won't have anywhere to live and put your food. And myth number 10.
10.
Namely, that you can invest in gold and silver, that investing in gold and silver is a thing. No, it's not. Gold and silver are not investments. They are money. Money is what you invest in other things. Buying or acquiring or trading your credit, meaning your dollars or whatever currency you use, trading your credit for gold and silver is not investing. It's divesting. The system that everyone is stuck in is a debt/credit system. In order to get out of that system, to divest from it completely, you have to get out of the bottom layer of credit, which is dollars itself. If you own a currency, you are invested by virtue of owning that currency in the central bank issuer of that currency. If you own dollars, you invest in the Fed. If you own euros, you invest in the ECB. If you own shekels, you invest in the Bank of Israel. And most of these central banks, in turn, invest in the Fed because they have dollars in their balance sheet. That's why it's a dollar-based credit system. The only way to divest completely from central banks is to acquire money itself. And then what happens is as the credit system falls apart and credit loses all purchasing power, all of the stuff that existed before the credit structure fell over still exists the day after. And so therefore, all of the purchasing power moves away from credit towards money, and those who own the most liquid commodities in the world will have the most liquidity and the most ability to acquire all of the capital systems that were being maintained by the credit system that is about to fall over and die. We're running out of time. The end game is coming. I don't know what silver will be tomorrow. I think we crossed 81 or 82 yesterday. It could be 85 to 100 any day now. Who knows where the interim top will be? No, I don't think we're quite in the end game yet. But once the next banking crisis hits and we embark on the final printing run, which we started because QE did start, but we're not in full gear yet. Once we are in full gear on the final printing round, the end game will be directly afterward. I don't know how much time we have, but it's not very long. So divest from the system now. Get your money with Miles Franklin. Bury it in a dirty man's safe. Code ENDGAME10 at checkout for 10% off. Check out the Endgame Investor on Substack. Link to all of the articles where I go into all of these myths in the description below. And you can also become my patron on Patreon for as little as $3 a month just to keep the peanut gallery out and trolls out. I don't look to make any money on these spiritual lessons. The last thing we did was on slavery and how governments enslave their people, how it's always the same tricks over and over and over again. Nothing ever changes. If you want to know how and why government behaves and does what it does, it's all in the Torah. Check out the Patreon in the link in the description below.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Finally made it! Rocky Balboa has shocked the world! He is the new heavyweight champion of the world!
Ladies and gentlemen, in a stunning upset, scoring the win by knockout, the new heavyweight champion of the world.
Offer me everything I ask for. Anything you want.